Welcome to Superheroes of Science. I'm Stephen.
And I'm Sarah. We co-host Science from the Experts. Our guests are professionals doing cutting-edge science right now.
They're experts in their field discussing what they know best. So listen up and learn real science from real people.
Subscribe now and stay informed of our latest episodes and show your support. Joining us today on Superheroes of Science, we are pleased to welcome Nicole Chavas, who is president of a sustainable engineering firm known as Greenprint Partners, and also Lucy Kopchak, who is an associate engineer with Greenprint Partners. So welcome to both of you. Thank you both of you for being here. And I think we're going to learn a little something about green infrastructure.
Did we say all that right?
Yeah.
We usually struggle with introducing one person, and introducing two is like a whole new game for us.
Yeah.
I feel like we've just like raised the whole bar. Before we can know what you do, I think we need to know what is sustainable engineering. I think would be can we define that, what sustainable engineering would be?
Yeah. How about our engineer, Lucy? Do you want to take a shot at what that means to you to be a civil engineer focused on sustainability?
Sure. Yeah. So we are both a civil and planning firm. So I'm on the engineering side and doing a lot of the design work of the projects that we're working on. And so our main focus here is working on green stormwater infrastructure. And so that is a aspect of civil engineering. It's we work in water, stormwater, and then green infrastructure. That's kind of like our lane that we're in civil engineering. And so green infrastructure as a whole is basically just designing systems that use natural process of storing stormwater for like a multiple benefits that we have. So a lot of it has to do with keeping it out of our stormwater system, our gray infrastructure, in order to help reduce the amount of volume of water that is in those systems. And then also just keeping water exactly where it is, where it lands, and kind of replicating like a natural system of infiltrating stormwater on our sites that we're working at.
Yeah. So when people think of civil engineering, they think of big bridges and roads and these kind of big gray infrastructure, projects. And when we think of civil infrastructure, we think of nature and trees and plants and soils, and how those are also forms of infrastructure that are part of our urban environment. And how can those be used in ways to help kind of provide critical infrastructure elements to people where they live. And so when we think about sustainability, we're thinking about how we can kind of bring the natural environment back to where we live, when historically engineering has done a lot to kind of pave over our cities and pave over that nature. We want to find a way to bring that nature back.
Literally pave over. I like that. But so what type of projects would your company such as
Greenprint infrastructure?
Greenprint Partners.
Greenprint Partners.
We're struggling. What type of projects? I noticed Lucy said something about the keeping water where it stays and out of the gray water. So you'll have to explain what gray water means. And then I have this problem. I ask a bunch of questions. I'm sorry. But so that's my first question is can you explain what you mean by gray water? And second question is, what type of projects do you accept and you work on as part of this type of company?
Yeah, go ahead, Lucy.
I can take the first half, maybe about the gray infrastructure, if you want to take the second half. Okay. So we think of the stormwater infrastructure as gray infrastructure, and then green infrastructure, which is what we're focusing on. So gray infrastructure is what's been around in cities for decades. That's the very traditional concrete pipes, the storm sewers that you see in the streets. It's what is the very traditional system that collects stormwater, transports it to a water treatment center, and then puts that water back into our system. So it's the very traditional, like, gray, I think is a good way of describing it, because it's it's not a natural system.
Okay.
Great. And so the type of projects we do are trying to move away from that kind of centralized gray infrastructure or build on it with more nature. So as we've, again, built all these gray systems, we want to find ways to bring more nature back into our communities, both to help manage stormwater, but also create all these additional benefits that we know you get when you bring more, green space and flowers and trees to a community. And so that's called green infrastructure. And so that green infrastructure is basically using natural systems to absorb water where it falls, as opposed to having to route it through all of our sewers and, to the wastewater treatment plant. And nature actually does a really great job of taking water, absorbing it, storing it, cleaning it, much better than all the sophisticated ways that we've tried to engineer water systems in the past. So what that looks like is rain gardens. It can be green roofs, permeable pavers that allow water to be absorbed right where it falls, as opposed to kind of moving it into centralized systems. And our goal is to work with cities and sewer districts and private property owners to design and construct as many of these green features as we can to make our cities more resilient and greener.
That was exactly the question I was going to ask you. You just kind of finished with that. Is who are some of the people that you'll collaborate with on these projects?
Yeah, so what's really interesting about green infrastructure is that it's distributed. We need rain gardens all over the city to have it achieve the kind of impact we want to see it achieve. And so that means, it involves everybody. Whereas again, our sewers, our historical sewer systems, a city, a utility could kind of manage that all on their own. It's all under our streets, it's underground. But if we want to put rain gardens everywhere, everyone has to work together. So we will work with both public agencies like municipalities or sewer districts to help them figure out how to plan and design rain gardens on public property. And then we'll also work with private property owners who may be interested in making their sites more resilient against flooding, or helping kind of contribute to the climate resiliency of their neighborhoods to install these types of systems on their sites as well. So it takes a city, it takes a village of everybody who lives, works, and plays in a community to be able to install these things to allow them to have the impact we're looking for.
So I heard the word flooding there. So because I'm going through in my head, don't take it that I'm really a bad person. I do care about the environment, but I'm going to ask it in a way that I don't. Why do I care? Why would someone care about being green? It just sounds like it's more expensive to me. Why would I want that? Don't look at me that way, sir.
Just judging, right?
Yeah, I totally picked up on that. I already said I do care.
Yeah. So with climate change, the impacts of climate change mean that we're seeing heavier rainfalls, stronger storms, and our infrastructure is not really equipped to deal with the level of rain activity that we've been seeing. We're here based in Chicago, and this summer we had a number of very large storms that flooded our streets. It flooded people's basements. And so it's here, we have to deal with it. We need to find new innovative ways to try to manage all of that rainwater. Otherwise, we're just going to continue to see more and more flooding events that make it hard to, just live our daily lives. We work with a lot of schools, for example, where when it rains heavily, they can't even use their soccer fields because they become ponds. And so these sorts of systems can help manage that water so that their playgrounds are more available for use more days of the year as a result. And that's just one example of how flooding impacts kind of everybody on a day-to-day level, and why it behooves us all to want to be a part of that solution.
How long does it take if let's say you have a soccer field that floods regularly every year, and whoever's in charge of the soccer field decides they want to do something about that? What's the timeline that they're looking at, and generally speaking, where you would start to notice some of that a flooding event, like fewer flooding events from working with
that was like an awkward way of saying, hey, how long does it take to do a project?
Yeah, right.
You were asking so nice. You just said, hey, how long is it take? Approximately how long does that type of project take?
Yeah, Lucy, do you want to take a shot at how long it typically takes to design and then construct a rain garden, for example?
Yeah, I think the the longest part of it that may be people don't realize is the design process and everything before it's shovel ready and it's able to be constructed. So we start from usually, meeting with the landowners, seeing what is available on the property, seeing what naturally what stormwater is able to be captured on that site. There is an origination, kind of this like concept plan, very high level. We go through, all the way through 30, 60, 100% design process, get everything permitted, work with, our contractors, and then the construction usually takes a few months, but what is the majority, the bulk of the project is all the design stuff and making sure that everything works. It's a natural system, like Nicole said, but they are engineered systems in order to store a lot more stormwater than it probably looks from the surface. Sometimes it can just look like a few plants above ground, but what's really working is everything below ground that rainwaters are designed to do, is to hold as much stormwater as they're designed to be.
I like that.
Mhm.
I mean, it's very important that we do that. And I know here, like in Lafayette, where we are,
Mhm.
they just did a huge project separating the stormwater and the sewage water
Yes.
and doing, I don't know, roads were for literally years.
Yeah, right.
That size of the project for years. But it was so everything didn't drain into our sewer system,
Mhm.
Right.
and which makes our water cleaner in quite a number of ways. So you don't have flood events, they don't have as much discharge and things like that. And so our waterways are much healthier along with the ecosystems around us. And so it's I definitely see where the scope of a project would determine a lot of your time
Mhm.
within that type of project. But I've always wondered who decides those things.
Yeah.
Is it a negotiation then that you're doing? Is let's say a city, the science city. We're going to design a city. You ready?
Okay. Yeah.
We should.
Yeah.
This be fun. We're going to design it's called the Science City. And we're going to come to you and say, okay, we want to design this so it does trap the water. We want that water to stay there, both because we want it to trickle in for the groundwater to use later, and don't want it just to run away, and to help control runoff, which
Mhm.
pick up pollutants, things like that. Who makes all those decisions then on how that needs to happen?
Yeah, so it's usually the city Department of Public Works or the water department. Every city has a different government structure, which makes this challenging because everywhere does it a little bit differently. It's kind of hard to translate, solutions or approaches from city to city because every government is structured differently. But for the most part, it's a public works department or a water department. It is led by engineers who make those decisions, who partner with other departments. Where it takes a lot of cooperation. So you might have the streets department, the public works department, a water department that all need to work together to make these decisions collaboratively, which can take a long time. And people may have different perspectives on what the right use of our space is or how to design things. So it definitely requires folks working together in a really positive way.
Now, how much leeway is like, so if I came to you for our City of Science, I like this idea.
Okay.
Yeah. Can I be mayor?
Sure. I think you should be. Yeah.
And so as the mayor of the future City of Science, if I come to you and say, okay, this is what we want, are you going to be like, okay, here, talk to Lucy and she'll just draw that up? Or is Lucy then, are you as the engineer for that, are you designing that yourself? Or then are you working with teams of people that you're collaborating with to pull in all of that knowledge and expertise? How does that work? I asked that in the most awkward way. I'm surprised.
Yeah, no, I
catchy
think I get what you're what you're getting at. A lot of this is in collaboration with those city what do you call them? Like public works
So
department.
it is mainly with those people, the city type people. I
Right,
know,
yeah,
Nicole, you said that. Well, you work with the city. And I got a
Yeah.
feeling you're thinking, I just answered that question. But I just didn't know how much your team
Mhm.
was in charge of developing varieties. Because if I'm clueless about all that, let's face it, I am, then I'm going to rely on you, obviously. But I didn't know if you brought in other experts too, or if it's just like,
Yeah.
here, now you need to come up with, I have to bring in the experts. How does that work?
Yeah. So for a bigger vision, kind of like what you're talking about for a city of science, the engineers obviously bring their design chops. They know how to design these systems, but we also are a planning firm. And that's where people are thinking a little bit more broadly about how do we think about these solutions on a city scale, as opposed to just how do we design these rain gardens to achieve a specific goal. And so what our planning team does is they play that role of kind of collaborator, convener, making sure that all the folks who do need to be in the room to have this conversation, make decisions are working together. And then the other really key part of what we do is make sure that the community has a voice in the process. So we don't want to design these systems and then find out that the community doesn't like, XYZ, or that they're getting in the way of parts of the city that they were planning to use for other things. So we also want to make sure that we're doing a really robust community engagement to get a sense of what the priorities of the community are, what challenges they're facing that we can help solve, what things they care about that we can kind of design for. So I use the example of a school. If we're designing a school in City of Science that is having flooding issues and wants to, become a great new green space, they might tell us about how their kids love to play soccer and they want their soccer field to be dry year round, and that they are really interested in integrating their science curriculum with their new projects so that they can learn more about green infrastructure and different types of plants and wildlife that may be coming to their site now that they have these cool new projects in place. And so that's where the planning part of our company comes in, is to kind of bring together all these different perspectives and expertises to try to set kind of clear shared goals and then do what needs to be done to achieve them.
I think that's great to get that community input then as well. I'm glad to hear that's part of that process. It's really neat.
You feel like just as average Joe, or average Steve, it's that your voice is never heard. And so to hear from a firm that helps design and plan things like, oh no, public is very important, what they want, that's reassuring.
Yeah,
that really is.
Yeah. I think that's what's neat about green infrastructure. Lucy talked about the, historical green infrastructure is big sewers underground. Community wasn't necessarily engaged on we're building a big sewer underground, other than to say, hey, we might be tearing your street up.
Yeah.
Sorry. But with green, it's visible, it's plants in your community. It's a real opportunity for more community collaboration, because a new visible investment that's a living, breathing, form of infrastructure is coming to a community. And we want to make sure that we're bringing everyone together around it.
Now, I see, it seems like, and I'm just guessing that I don't know if like federal or state rules have changed and stuff, but it seems like all projects have a lot more of the green engineering side these days. Are there like laws, ordinances, whatever in place that make that more of a priority than it used to be too?
Yeah, a lot of cities are getting more stringent in their regulations to require more green solutions. So Milwaukee, for example, it's a great example of a city that's really going all in on green infrastructure. And so now any new building that's built in the city of Milwaukee has to incorporate green infrastructure on the site to help manage its stormwater and bring more green space into that community. So it's a tool that cities have to spur more investment in green infrastructure by requiring it in new development, for example.
Okay. We teach several water quality programs and stuff. And so we're always talking about, runoff and how pollutants happen and buffer zones. And I can't remember what that one starts with an R. Riparian zone. Oh, whatever.
Riparian.
Yeah. Struggle with words. You wouldn't know English was my original language. Wait, it's my only language. But I can't speak. I haven't mastered it yet. But we just talk about these and teach to students the importance of these for the environment around us, and how everything within the environment is connected, and how our health is dependent on the health of the environment around us. And so I'm glad to hear that more places are doing ordinances that require that. I'm sure as a company, you're glad too. Not just as an individual, but as a company, you're glad too, because I'm guessing that helps a little bit with the business side and the demand. But and you mentioned private property too, was one of the things you said cities, you in the list. I remember hearing cities, I remember hearing private property. If for me wanting to do my little homestead area, would I also, do people like that contact you too, saying, hey, I'd like to redo this and make this more green? Do you plan smaller projects, or is it just mainly huge projects?
Yeah. So what's neat about rain gardens is that they can be huge to support like many millions of gallons of stormwater, on a large site, or they can also be in someone's backyard. I actually have a rain garden in my own backyard that takes the water from our roof and then directs it into the rain garden, which is really neat. It's a nice way for me to make my own personal impact. That's a smaller project that a company like Greenprint is maybe a little too small for us, but there are a lot of smaller local landscape contractors who can do the exact same work and give the exact same benefit. It's just a much smaller version of the type of larger projects that we at Greenprint do.
Okay.
Nice.
That'd be more of a landscaping places that do those then, the small ones?
Yeah, and that's an interesting development, I guess, with green infrastructure, is that the type of maintenance, the type of construction and maintenance for a bunch of rain gardens is very different from the type of construction and maintenance for a huge pipe. And so it takes a different workforce to be able to do that. And so one of the things that's happening is a lot of landscaping firms are sort of upskilling to be able to install and maintain these rain gardens that are very similar to landscaping. But as Lucy mentioned, the soils are different. Things about them are different. They require a slightly different approach and just knowledge of how to maintain these kinds of systems. So we also need the companies that service these types of projects to be able to kind of keep up with this evolution towards green infrastructure.
And so how do y'all get clients? Is that, do you actively send out, say, hey, we do this, we know you're planning something, or do they automatically searching for you already?
Yeah, it's a few different things. Some of it is relationship building. So we've got relationships with a lot of the largest sewer districts and municipalities that are doing a lot of green infrastructure investment. What's also really interesting is a way that a lot of cities are making green infrastructure happen is by actually providing grants to property owners. So another thing that we do in a lot of cities where these grant programs exist is we will go find sites that are a really good fit. They've got a huge parking lot or a big roof that's creating a lot of runoff, and they've got green space that could be turned into rain gardens or bioswales that could, manage that runoff, that are eligible for these grant programs. So another thing that we do often is help property owners like schools and churches and community centers take advantage of these grant programs so that they can get these neat projects on their site, but recognize that they're not engineering firms. This is not something they do regularly. They need some support to be able to know the program exists, apply for the funds, design a project, hire contractors. And so that's something that we can do to kind of support them through that entire process.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome, because places like that wouldn't think they would have access to a Lucy. Need someone to design this, but they wouldn't know where to go. So it's really awesome that you're looking for those and helping them make those connections so that they can improve those spaces too. But I don't know why it surprises me a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm surprised, I guess.
Yeah, Lucy, is there any favorite project? Lucy does a lot of the design for that kind of project. So talk about a favorite project she's working on now and what it looks like.
Sure. Yeah. One of them, off the top of my head, is out in San Francisco. So San Francisco has a really defined wet and dry period. And so we're working, it's a school and a church. And so they have a playground area and a large field that in half the year it's wet and half the year it's dry, the grass dies, and obviously it's in San Francisco, so they pay a lot of money to water their field. They have an irrigation system right now. And so something that we were able to do through a grant program, like Nicole mentioned, is create subsurface chambers underneath that field that's going to store the water year round during the wet season, and then use that water to irrigate the field during the dry season. So they hopefully will have a closed system, basically, that they won't have to buy any water, and they'll be storing it under that field. So that's in the design process right now. I'm currently working on that. I think that's like a really interesting and innovative way to like have multi benefits to this one site.
Oh,
That's amazing. That's even possible to design something like that. That's amazing.
Yeah. There are a lot of the system that we're using uses to water the field. Also, it uses like capillary action to draw water up from the subsurface system, and so that saves like 99% of the water that's captured. Instead of spraying it with a sprinkler, you lose like a huge percent of that water. So it's just like another way that it's like this engineered system to like give them exactly what they're looking for.
Oh, that is now. How did you learn that? Because I'm thinking in my head, she's an engineer. How does she know that? And so, how do you learn? How would someone, if I'm like, okay, that's cool. I'll never grow up, but some people might grow up and want to be like you. And so, how do you learn stuff like that? What area and stuff?
Yeah, I am a graduate of Purdue and was in the EEE program, the Environmental and Ecological Engineering program there. I'm a proud Boilermaker. And what really got me introduced to green infrastructure was Dr. Lindsay Payne's course that I took, I think my junior year. It was EEE 495. I think it was called Urban Water Projects. If anyone's listening and is interested in green infrastructure, it's a great class. Everyone loved it. But it mimicked kind of the work that I'm doing right now. And so we worked with a community partner in Lafayette. I worked with it was called Bauer Community Center, and we worked with that client really closely. We walked around their site. We figured out what was feasible. We wrote a grant. It was, I think, under $10,000. Worked with a contractor, designed with, like, it was the whole process. And it was one of the first real world experiences of creating like an engineering project from the start to the end, and having all of those like impacts in the community and working with kids. They came out there and helped us plant the rain garden when we were in construction. So I think that really like piqued my interest in green infrastructure and stormwater, but also this like higher level of like the planning aspect and looking at something on like a city scale and bringing those like green aspects to a city.
That's cool. Now, Nicole, you own this company that we're speaking of. And so what background, if I wanted to be, that's aspires a little higher than I think I could do. But if I wanted to really step up my game when I grow up and actually be an owner of something like this, what's your background to be able to do something like this?
Yeah. So my background is in business, accounting, finance. I have an accounting degree. But I was an accountant for 2 years and immediately said, this is not for me. But so I had a business sensibility, but I wanted to apply it to things that I cared about. And I've always cared about sustainable urban development and climate solutions. And so I wanted to find a way to bring my business experience to work that mattered to me. And that's what kind of drew me to the planning and engineering field, because it really is, I just see these sustainable tools to support our built environment as being so valuable. So that's what led me and my co-founder, whose background is more in community planning, to start the company together. And I could bring that kind of business operations perspective to how to run the business. She could bring that planning perspective. And then we eventually brought engineers in to build out our engineering team as well, so we could provide all these different services. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a planner, but I love working with them because I learned so much from them. And I really see my role as helping to make sure that they're getting the kind of work that gets them up every day, that gets them excited to put pen to paper and, design these cool projects and work with the community and make sure that they have everything that they need to do their job and be happy in it. So I think the business background helps, but just like a passion to learn and learn from others and, be a resource to them is just, I think, it's what I bring every day to the job and to the company.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
Well, we appreciate your time, and we appreciate learning more about green infrastructure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Science from the Experts from Purdue University Superheroes of Science.
If you like this episode, subscribe, give us a positive review, and share the love. Boiler up!
Hammer down.